Ink T to the G. Now I'm here with at the Chef Rosanna, and this is Team Hallenzano. We're back with another reaction. This one is, of course, our bread and butter. We're going back to Mr. Boat, and this one's going to be found footage fuels decades-long mystery, and it says warning, graphic content. So we're going to give you guys a trigger warning if you guys are scared of
sensitive or anything.
Go ahead and do one of these or something.
You're about to go to sleep. Don't watch it. Hey, monster.
Reporter named In 1969, an adventure magazine reporter named Milt Macklin flew to New Guinea with his film crew to shoot a documentary about a missing person who had gone missing in that area. Milt's hope was he was actually going to find this missing person and capture it on film, really pushing his documentary over the top. But despite shooting all this footage and looking all over the place, they never found the missing person. And so Milt ultimately went back home and just put all the footage in storage, never even watched it. Well, 40 years later, that footage got pulled out of storage because another crew wanted to make a documentary about this missing person. And when they watched this footage, they found something totally unbelievable on it. And so today, I'm going to tell you the story of what they found, and then more importantly, what it revealed about this missing person. And I will say right now, it is highly disturbing. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please gift the like button the complete set of Where's Waldo books, but make sure you cut all the Waldos off of every page first. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. On the morning of Saturday, November 18th, 1961, a 23-year-old man named Michael Rockefeller reached down and grabbed the pull cord that was connected to the outboard motor that was on the boat that Michael was riding, and grabbed the...
I ain't gonna lie, he kind of looked like Macaulay Culkin. Home Alone kid.
Mm-hmm. A little bit, yeah.
pull cord that was connected to the outboard motor that was on the boat that Michael was riding in. And Michael, he pulled and pulled on that cord, but he could not get this engine to restart. It just sputtered and wouldn't turn over. And without power, that meant that Michael and his small crew just continued to drift farther and farther out to sea. But that wasn't even the worst of this situation. The boat that Michael and his crew were on, which was a 40-foot-long catamaran, it was two handcrafted canoes tied together, well, it was starting to sink. Minutes before, Michael and his crew had been happily traveling along the beautiful green jungled coast of New Guinea when they had to cross over this area where the water was particularly turbulent. There was this river in New Guinea that was feeding out to the Arafura Sea, which is where Michael and his crew were. And where this brown river met the blue water, it became very choppy with lots of rough waves. And so as Michael and his crew tried to cross that area, the waves came on board, they flooded the engine, it shut off. And then as more and more waves landed inside the boat began to sink. The reason why Michael and his crew were even out here and taking these chances to begin with is because Michael wanted to go see this tribe called the Asmats that lived in New Guinea, basically right past this area where this river was. They lived right on the coast. Michael was obsessed with the artwork that the Asmat tribe created, in particular, the very unique bis pole. These poles are created by the master carvers within the Asmat tribe. What they do is they take a single piece of wood and they etch it away until it looks like it's a bunch of men standing on each other's shoulders. Now, these bis poles are totally beautiful and intricate and wonderful to look at, but the Asmat tribe doesn't make them for art. They make them because they believe they contain the souls of the warriors from their tribe who have been killed in combat. And until the Asmats avenge these downed warriors, basically until the tribe kills their enemies, these souls remain trapped in these bis poles, which means the Asmats don't really ever get rid of these poles. They don't sell them. They don't throw them away. They are just part of their culture and society. But months ago, Michael had come and visited the Asmat tribe. He had learned about these bis poles and what they meant, and he believed he had successfully negotiated a deal where he would barter some of his own goods in order to get one of their bis poles. But even though Michael gave them all the things he had offered, they had not in return sent the bis pole. And so now Michael was coming back to hopefully be able to claim the bis pole and take it with him. But as Michael sat in his sinking catamaran, watching the muddy shores of New Guinea get farther and farther away as he drifted farther and farther out into the Arafura Sea, the last thing on his mind was the bis pole. He needed to figure out what they were going to do. Michael's crew consisted of 3 other people. There was a French anthropologist named Rene, and there were 2 teenagers who were actually Asmat guides, and their names were Simon and Leo. And so after Michael was unable to start the engine up, all 3 of them took their turn yanking on the cord, but they too could not get it to start. Finally, Simon and Leo spoke up, and they said to Michael and Renee that at this point they believed their only hope was abandoning the catamaran, jumping into the ocean, and swimming to shore, which for now was about a half mile away, but they were drifting so quickly out to sea that if they waited any longer, they might be too far away to actually make that swim. But Renee was not a good swimmer at all, and Michael was just not ready to totally abandon ship and leave this thing out here to
They gotta make a decision quick.
Because on board the catamaran was all this stuff
to
he had
learn how
brought.
to swim.
Yeah, but I ain't gonna lie.
I'm not a good swimmer either, but honestly,
You got no choice. I ain't gonna lie.
I will go in that water.
Half a mile is still far. Like swimming that?
It's extremely
That's
far.
far.
It
Half a
depends
mile.
if they're like, I don't know, crocodile or whatever. Like,
Oh, I'm pretty sure there's stuff in the water, but still, like half a mile is still far. So, me personally, you gotta get in that water quickly. Like I wouldn't want to get in the water either because I don't like sharks and other stuff like that. in
yeah,
there. But yeah, you gotta. Yeah,
I mean, you don't have choices.
you're none. You get too far.
Out here to sink because on board the catamaran was all this stuff he had brought along, like tobacco and fishing line and clothes and candy and all this different stuff that he knew this tribe wouldn't have, and he could use it as leverage to continue bartering to get his bis pole and to get other artwork they might be offering. And so even though Michael understood that obviously this catamaran and everything on it is going to sink into the ocean at some point, he just wasn't there mentally to jump off now and just kind of abandon all this stuff. And so a decision was made that the 2 Asmat guides, the 2 teenagers, Simon and Leo, they on their own would jump out, swim to shore, and try to get help, while Michael and Renee stayed back and waited for that help to come. And so a few moments later, the 2 teenagers jumped into the water and began their long swim to shore. And as they did, Michael watched, and it suddenly dawned on him just how far away he was from his own home. It had been months since Michael had last showered, so he smelled terrible. He was totally sunburned and caked in dirt, and his hands were rough and calloused from all the rowing he was doing. But this was not really Michael's real life, because Michael was not from New Guinea or from anywhere near here. He was actually from America, where his family was one of the most well-known, influential, and richest families ever. Like in the history of humanity, the Rockefeller family are in like the top 10 of the most powerful people ever. Michael's grandfather was the oil tycoon John D. Rockefeller, who at the time was literally the richest man in the world. And Michael's father, Nelson Rockefeller, was at the time the governor of New York and the future vice president of the United States. But despite having these unbelievable resources at his disposal, Michael was not compelled to kind of be a Rockefeller. Instead, he found his calling in the wilds of New Guinea. He had first come here 7 months earlier with a team of Harvard University filmmakers who were looking to document a very remote tribe. And Michael just fell in love with the adventure of this trip, even though on this trip, while they were filming a battle between this remote tribe and another tribe, Michael got shot accidentally in the shoulder with an arrow. So despite being wounded effectively in combat, Michael just loved being in New Guinea. In fact, Michael actually never told his family about getting shot in the shoulder with this arrow because he was worried if he told his family, the all-powerful Rockefeller family, they would respond by seeking out retribution against one of these tribes that had inadvertently harmed Michael Rockefeller.
Yeah.
And so Michael was just very respectful and
like that.
protective of the people he came in contact with in New Guinea. And in many ways, he viewed them as more like his people than his family. And so after the Harvard University filmmakers wrapped up their documentary and went back to America, Michael had stayed in New Guinea. And in the meantime, his father, Nelson Rockefeller, had opened up a museum back home in New York called the Museum of Primitive Art. And what it displayed was artwork from places like New Guinea. Now, this was the early 1960s. And so many Westerners viewed natives of New Guinea, like the people of the Asmat tribe, as being very primitive and backwards. And so as a result, there was a lot of people that were drawn to this new museum in New York just for the spectacle of it, to see what these primitive backwards people were creating. But Michael felt like he had a deeper understanding of the natives of New Guinea.
Yeah, they're not
and
primitive.
he felt like it was his responsibility to go out and find the incredible artwork all around New Guinea, including like the bis poles from the Asmat tribe, and send that artwork back to his father to be put up in this museum so that it was more than just a spectacle. Michael wanted the people of the West to appreciate and respect the natives of New Guinea the same way he did. And he believed through art he could do that. And so Michael had teamed up with Rene, the French anthropologist, to go all around New Guinea to find this artwork.
Well, I mean,
Probably that it's mean not respecting them.
that's true.
They do that thing for a reason.
Right. He told us. He told us what the reason was. Like, you know what I'm saying? He told us. It's the souls of their people. Or the fallen
You're just
soldiers.
being a rich, stupid kid.
Yeah, kind
Pretty
of.
much.
Yeah,
You want your toy. You do everything to have your toy.
I guess.
I mean, that's how I act. Like, he got money, go there, and you think, like, I'll give you candy, tobacco, and you give me whatever I want. Just like a rich kid thing.
Yeah, I see what you're saying with it. I don't think he got to get the whole plan going. but that was the plan.
I don't know. Let's see.
But that was the plan, though.
With Rene, the French anthropologist, to go all around New Guinea to find this artwork to send back to his dad. A few hours after Simon and Leo had leapt off the sinking catamaran and began their swim to shore, Michael and Rene had no idea if they'd even made it to shore. They hadn't seen anybody show up to rescue them. And so as far as they knew, they had no idea how close they were to being rescued or not. And as they looked down, they saw their catamaran was sinking lower and lower in the water. And so at some point, Michael and Rene just grabbed buckets and began bailing the water out of the catamaran, which was totally useless. The water was coming in way too quickly, but they had nothing else to do. And so they're bailing the water out. And then a rogue wave comes through and flips the entire catamaran over, sending Michael and Rene into the sea. And so luckily, Michael and Rene were able to swim to the surface. They swam over to the now upturned catamaran, but there was an air pocket kind of trapped underneath it. And so it was staying afloat. And so Michael and Rene grabbed onto the catamaran, and Michael actually grabbed a gas canister that had come off the boat, and he attached it to his belt like a flotation device. And so he and Rene just kind of held on to this upturned catamaran. Michael was also supported by this gas canister, and they just continued to wait, hoping that Simon and Leo had made it to shore and that help would be arriving soon. But in the back of Michael's mind, he knew that if help didn't come soon, Michael might have to do something drastic, like attempt the swim himself, which now was way farther than half a mile away. By the next morning, when the sun came up, Michael and Rene were still in the water, holding on to that catamaran, waiting for help to arrive, but no help had come. Now, Michael was a very good swimmer, but by this point, he knew they were at least 5 or maybe even 10 miles from shore. So this would be a gargantuan swim in pretty rough waters. But, you know, Michael, he's a Rockefeller. He had a lot of confidence, and he began telling Rene that, hey, I'm going to do this swim. I know I can do it. I can swim the whole distance. Even if it's 10 miles, I can do it. You know, you're going to have to just hang tight. It's going to take a while, but I'll get us help. Rene begged Michael not to go, but Michael said, I have to do something. Otherwise, we're going to die out here. And so all Rene could do was watch as Michael stripped off some of his clothes and attached another gas canister to his belt to give him a little bit more flotation. And then Michael shook Rene's hand. And then right around 8 a.m. on Sunday, November 19th, 1961, Michael began the swim. About 12 hours later, so that night, while Renee is still just holding onto this catamaran, hoping help is going to come soon, suddenly, kind of without warning, the sky suddenly erupted with this incredibly bright flame. And what it was a plane flying overhead that had spotted Renee and the upturned catamaran. They had fired a flare into the air to be like, hey, we see you, we're going to send help. And then just a couple of hours later, a boat came around and picked Renee up. And when Renee climbed on board, he was so relieved, and he asked the captain, hey, did Michael Rockefeller tell you I was out here? Is that why you knew I was here? And the captain said, no, we were told by two teenagers, two guides, Simon and Leo, that you were out here. No one's heard from Michael. Now, you need to remember that Michael Rockefeller was a Rockefeller. Yeah. And so as soon as Renee heard, oh my goodness, we don't know where Michael is, and he told the captain that Michael had begun this unbelievable swim to shore to get help, it was like suddenly a bomb had gone off in the Rockefeller family, and they committed all of their money and their resources and their influence to launch the biggest manhunt basically ever to find Michael. They dispatched ships and helicopters and planes. They got in touch with the U.S. Navy and got them to be fully involved. I mean, they looked everywhere for weeks.
Look, I'm not against using your power in situations like that. Like,
I mean, it's not like a bad situation.
No, like, come get me.
I mean, it's a bad situation, okay?
Come get me. That's all I'm saying. Come get me.
I mean, if I have money, my baby lost. Even if I don't have money, like, even if you think like a father, family, whatever, you even if you don't have money, you will do everything.
Right. But if you do have money, you get the Navy.
Yeah, I mean, you will do extra for sure.
Get the Navy for me. That's all I'm saying. Get the Navy.
Well, like, that's what everybody like would do. Like, even if you don't have.
Yeah, no, makes sense. But I'm saying, like, get the Navy for me though. I don't know about everybody else. I'm talking about me. Come get me.
I would do
her too. Yeah, her. Yeah. But if you get me, she's safe. I'm saying.
U.S. Navy and got them to be fully involved. I mean, they looked everywhere for weeks, but they could not find Michael. This search for Michael would continue for years.
I've never even heard of this story, like, because we know the Rockefellers. We know the Rockefellers. Like,
honestly, I was never imagining a Rockefeller go in the white like that.
Because I bet they never did it again.
Weeks, but they could not find Michael. This search for Michael would continue for years. Yeah. Now, it wouldn't be as intense as the first few weeks, but there was always somebody or some entity looking for Michael around the area where he had begun that swim. But by 1964, so 3 years after Michael had begun the swim to shore, the Rockefeller family finally accepted that Michael had to be dead, that he had to have drowned on that 5 or 10 mile swim to shore.
Oh, shoot.
Wow.
That's a picture of the with the actual gas canister.
Wow.
That's crazy. We're gonna skip that little Stamps.com though. Holla at it. Hey, check it out. Hey, it might be on something. Stamps.com.
And when the family finally kind of accepted that that is what happened, that became the story in America about what happened to Michael Rockefeller. In fact, his sister even wrote a best-selling book about grieving his loss. But in New Guinea, a very different story began to spread about what happened to Michael. Rumors about his fate were whispered along trade routes and between visiting missionaries and gossiped about in tabloid and adventure magazines. In 1969, so 5 years after Michael was declared dead by his family, an adventure magazine reporter named Milt Macklin heard from this mysterious Australian person who was a source for this magazine that they had actually run into Michael Rockefeller recently in the jungle of New Guinea, not far from where he supposedly disappeared. And Milt would actually follow up on this tip, despite how not credible it was, and he would go to New Guinea with a film crew, and he would go to this area, and he would look everywhere for Michael. He would talk to locals. I mean, he really scoured the area, but there was no sign of Michael. And so Milt, feeling very let down by this, he came back home and he actually wrote a best-selling book about his quest to find Michael Rockefeller. But crucially...
That's crazy. You could even write a book about not succeeding.
I mean...
Like, I went out there.
I tried.
Hey, did the best I could. Hey, read about how I fucked up or I failed.
Best-selling book about his quest to find Michael Rockefeller. But crucially, even though he had shot all this footage, both at a distance and up close, of all these tribes in the area where Michael supposedly was, he and his team never really reviewed the footage. They basically shot all this footage while they were there looking for Michael, couldn't find him, and said, meh, and put the footage aside. But 40 years later, another documentary film crew decided they were going to go to New Guinea and look for Michael, because there were still all these rumors floating around that Michael was alive and living in the jungles of New Guinea. And before they actually went to New Guinea to go looking for Michael, they uncovered this unwatched footage from Milt Macklin, and they watched all of it, and they discovered something unbelievable. Amongst the hours and hours of footage, there is this brief shot taken from a distance where the film crew is shooting on land out towards the water, and you see this canoe come into frame. And it's full of Asmat tribe warriors. This is a war party, and they're making their way, presumably, into battle with some other tribe. But amongst these big, strong men is one man who totally stands out because he doesn't look like the other Asmat warriors. He is a naked, bearded white man who, again, even though the quality of the film was poor, he totally looked like Michael Rockefeller. And so as soon as word got out about this footage, very quickly rumors began to spread all around the world about how this heir to a billionaire's fortune had decided to turn away from his family and just live amongst the Asmat tribe as one of theirs. Now, again, we have no idea if that really was Michael Rockefeller. It could easily have been, a missionary or some other white person that happened to be in New Guinea, but the story was incredible, and so it spread everywhere. In 2012, so 4 years after this unwatched Milt Macklin footage came to light, and over 50 years since Michael Rockefeller actually went missing, a National Geographic journalist named Carl Hoffman, who had grown up totally fascinated by the mystery surrounding Michael Rockefeller, he decided that he would go to New Guinea and finally get to the bottom of what happened to Michael Rockefeller. And after Carl and his interpreter went to New Guinea and lived with the Asmat tribe for months and gained their trust and gained their respect, they began to tell him a brand new story that he had never heard before about what happened to Michael. The real story. And they gave him a dire warning that if he ever told anyone what actually happened to Michael, that the whole village would likely be killed, and maybe even he too would be killed. But Carl didn't listen. After hearing what really happened to Michael, he left New Guinea and wrote a book about it called Savage Harvest. And from his book...
They love these books, boy.
Hey.
I think that's like the white version of self-snitching. We're gonna write a book.
He left New Guinea and wrote a book about it called Savage Harvest. And from his book, here is what happened to Michael Rockefeller. On the morning of November 19th, 1961, so roughly 24 hours after Michael had jumped into the water and began this 5 to 10 mile swim to shore to get help, 3 Asmat tribe elders named Finn, Ajim, and Pep sat amongst 50 other tribe members in 8 long canoes. And they weren't going anywhere. They were just kind of resting at the mouth of this river, the same river that dumped out into the Arafura Sea, which is exactly where Michael and his crew had ran into all those rough waters and overturned, causing their whole situation. And so all these tribes people are just sitting there in their canoes. Some of them are smoking loosely wrapped cigars. Others are chewing on flour made from a palm plant called sago, and they're all naked, minus a couple of bands around their knees and their elbows, and some of them had very intricate piercings in their noses and their ears, but they're all just kind of sitting there. It was a long day, and they're enjoying some peace and quiet. But then suddenly, Ajim, one of the elders, noticed something making its way into the river from the sea. It was this white thing kind of slithering towards them. And immediately Ajim called out to the others to look, there's something over there. It's a white crocodile. It's a serpent. It's something. And they all look and they're watching, and slowly this white thing is moving its way closer and closer to them. And so, not wanting to be caught off guard, the entire group got ready and began paddling over to see what this thing was, because if it was a threat, they could deal with it. If it wasn't, so be it. And so as these 8 canoes converged on this white thing, some of them had their spears up ready to attack. But when they finally saw what this creature was, they realized it was not some serpent or crocodile or something. It was a white man, and he was floating on his back, and he had these weird flotation devices on, but he was not a threat. And so right away, all the tribesmen, they put down their spears, they kind of laugh, thinking that they were in danger for a second. And this white man, who was Michael Rockefeller, he rolled over and he looked up and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He's just swam like 10 miles to get here, and he's seeing the tribe that he had come to see in the first place. They've come here to rescue him. And so practically crying with relief, he turned around and grabbed one of their canoes. And as soon as he did, one of the elders, Pep, looked down at Michael holding onto his boat. And then Pep looked up at the other two elders, Finn and Jim, and they just stared at each other, then back at Michael, then back at each other, and then they nodded in agreement. And then Pep helped Michael into the boat. Michael immediately just laid in the middle of the boat. He was so exhausted from that swim, but he was so relieved. And he just laid there while the tribe kind of got back into position. They turned their canoes around and began paddling back up the river, back inland. And as they paddled, they began this very strange chant. All 8 canoes, all 50 plus members of the tribe, all in unison began this chant. And Michael, he had studied the Asmat tribe and felt like he knew a lot about their culture, but he had never heard this particular chant before. And so he was enchanted by it. And he tried to ask them, what does this mean? But they just completely ignored Michael and just continued to paddle and chant. And so Michael just laid there listening, getting carried along to safety, when all of a sudden the chanting stopped and the canoes turned and kind of made their way into this little inlet that led to a clearing right on the shore. And so Michael noticed they were slowing down. And so he kind of barely got up and looked over the edge of the canoe to see if they were at their village. But when he looked up, he saw there was no village in sight. It was just this clearing out on the shore. And right away, Michael's like, well, I hope we're going to the village soon because I have to find someone who can get in touch with the authorities, who can then go and rescue Renee and hopefully find Simon and Leo as well. And so Michael began trying to ask the men in his canoe if they would help him. But there was, of course, a massive language barrier and neither side really understood the other. And then at some point, one of the men from the Asmat tribe just began laughing at Michael. And when he did, the majority of the rest of the tribe looked over, saw what was going on, and they too began laughing at Michael. And so Michael had no idea what was going on. And then before he could do anything else, the entire tribe stopped laughing. And it was like in an instant, they were back into that rhythmic chanting as they slowly began making their way out of their canoes, making their way onto shore. And so Michael began to sense that something was wrong. And instead of getting out of the canoe with the rest of the tribe, he kind of instinctively laid back down on the canoe, almost like he was trying to get away from them. And when he did that, the tribesman who had first laughed at Michael, he stood right over Michael as he's doing this chant, and he smiled at Michael, and then he raised his spear and he drove it into Michael's side. And the second he did that, other members of the tribe raised these horns they were carrying and began blasting into their horns. And so Michael, he's screaming out in pain, but he's got no strength to defend himself. And so he kind of like rolled over onto the other side on this canoe, kind of trying to protect himself. And when he did that, the guy just lifted his spear again with a big smile on his face and drove it into Michael's other side. After the man pulled the spear out, Michael, who's in horrible pain, managed, perhaps with his adrenaline, to pull himself up and over the side of the canoe. So he kind of fell out onto the mud and he tried to stand up to get away from them, but there was nowhere he could go. And so as he's kind of fumbling in the mud, 2 of the tribesmen walked up behind him, grabbed him under the arms, and they began carrying him across the clearing towards the jungle. And as they walked, that rhythmic chanting continued, and periodically Michael would hear someone blast on their horn. And so Michael was dragged across the shoreline into the jungle and then finally to another clearing in the jungle, not anywhere near their village. And Michael was positioned in the middle of this clearing and put on his knees. And so Michael, he's kind of guarding his sides with his arms. He's incredibly weak. He's on his knees. The tribe kind of formed a circle around him, and they're continuing this chant. And then at some point, one of the tribesmen walked up to Michael, grabbed his head, and pushed it forward, exposing the back of his neck. And then another tribe member walked in. And again, the whole time, this chanting is going on. Horns are being blown. And this other tribesman comes up, and he raises an axe, and he brings it down on the back of Michael's neck. It would turn out the Asmat tribe knew who Michael was. They remembered him from his visit several months earlier when he had attempted to barter for their bis poles. And they had...
Let me find out you were hella right. A kid with money trying to spread that money around, and he's insulting people the whole time. Oh, that's crazy. They were
I
smiling.
mean,
We'll see.
you want to watch that thing? There is a soul in there. We do only 4 people who die. Then we're gonna kill you, and you're gonna be there.
That's
why they were laughing.
He got the pole.
Yeah.
He got the bispo. He became one. That's crazy.
The Asmat tribe knew who Michael was. They remembered him from his visit several months earlier when he had attempted to barter for their bis poles. And they had been totally offended that this rich white man had shown up and thought he could just buy one of their sacred artifacts like it was some trinket to be put on display in a museum. And so they had held on to a deep hatred for him. That was why they didn't send their bis pole to him. They weren't going to give it to him. But when Michael had kind of magically floated into their river, and suddenly the Asmat tribe has him sitting in their canoe, the 3 village elders, Finn, Ajim, and Pep, they all just kind of looked at each other and nodded in agreement that they were going to ritualistically kill Michael to avenge the deaths of many of their fallen warriors that those bis poles apparently contained the souls of, because many of their warriors had been killed by white men in the past. And so Michael was going to be their way to avenge their souls. And so that chant that Michael heard them all saying, that was the chant they did when they performed this execution ritual. Except they didn't just kill Michael. After one of those tribesmen brought the axe down on the back of Michael's neck, another tribesman walked up and grabbed Michael's hair, pulled his head back, and used a knife to slash at his throat to actually remove his head. And then after his head was removed, again with all the chanting continuing in this circle the whole time, members of the tribe came up and began cutting Michael's body absolutely to pieces, separating his organs, his flesh, and his bones into different piles. And then very quickly, they got a fire going and cooked and ate Michael.
Wow.
And of all the parts of his body that were eaten, his brain was apparently the most important. And so only Finn, Ajim, and Pep, the 3 elders, were allowed to eat the brain. And then finally, after they had finished eating and took all the remaining meat that had not been consumed, and they put it into their pouches to eat later, Finn, one of the elders, took Michael's skull and he would bring it back to the village and he would cover it in banana leaves and he would paint it and treat it like a trophy. A few days later, when that huge search party came through the area looking for Michael, the Asmat tribe knew they could never whisper a word about what happened to Michael, because if it got out, it's very likely that Westerners would want to retaliate against them.
Yeah.
And so for decades and decades, their secret stayed safe until Carl Hoffman of the National Geographic heard the story and then wrote the book about it, Savage Harvest. But despite publishing this book and lots of people reading it, there was always some question about the credibility of the story, because remember, there's all this intrigue and mystery around Michael's story to begin with, and now we have this account coming from the Asmat tribe, and so no one really knew how legitimate it was. And so to this day, the Rockefeller family, and generally speaking, authorities at large, still say that Michael Rockefeller drowned on his swim to shore trying to get help, and that's it.
Well, to be honest with you, as a father or a parent, you would want to just think that he just drowned. You don't want to hear that
something that crazy. It's not. I don't know. It's not even like the stabbing. It's like somebody hit my baby. Like it's way more. Like his head there, like a trophy.
All that.
Like it's a lot.
Yeah, and the fact that I don't think the Asmat tribe got obliterated, because I think we would have heard that in the story. But if the Rockefellers, they are still one of the most powerful ones. If they really felt that was true, I think they probably would wipe out a tribe, a whole tribe. Yeah, that's what I would think. I don't know.
And who he is, like the white guy who saw the video.
That's also a good question. Yeah, we still don't know. I feel like we didn't get the answer to our question, but I was also wondering, they said there was going to be graphic, the content graphic.
Yeah, I was expecting
for the picture.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I didn't get any of that. But yeah, man, Team Hallenzano with another one. This one was actually found footage fuels decades-long mystery. Okay. And What do you think about it?
Who knew about this story? I never heard about it.
I've never heard about it either. We are from America. We are from America. We know about the Rockefellers. I'm from America. She's from Italy.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I know.
Everybody knows the Rockefellers. Like, come on.
Who doesn't?
Worldwide. Yeah, worldwide now. Like,
but I never hear this story.
Me either. I didn't. Not at all. And man.
And honestly, I wasn't expecting a Rockefeller to, do that. Like
anything like that.
In the wild, alone, pretty much.
Naked. Chilling.
Yeah, like I will expecting like a bunch of military or something like that. Like
I'm not gonna lie though, I kind of agree with your theory though. I think that probably did happen though. Like he really offended them, and then they killed him. I mean, why would they just admit to killing him? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if it was a lie.
Yeah.
Like, that's, I don't know. But anyway, thank you for tuning in to Team Hallenzano on this one. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for tuning in, man. Like, comment, subscribe, share to be aware. Put us up out there. You know what I mean? Thank you for tuning in, and we out of here. Peace.